Learn how to use the optional second argument of JSON parse, known as the reviver function, to automatically inspect and transform specific values. In this lesson, we want to look at the JSON parse method, which is also known as the reviver function, to automatically inspect and transform specific values like date strings, for example, into live objects during the initial parsing process. So let's look at an example that demonstrates this. So let's move inside the script tag. Inside the script tag, let's first make a variable, and we can give it any name. But in this example, let me use text, and then it's going to contain a JSON format for data. So I want to add the name John. I want to add age of 30, and I also want to add city. And again, I want to add the birth of this person. So I want to add birth. So let me say the birth date is maybe year 2000. And let's take this back to May. And this probably is like maybe 20. Now that I have this variable, it's now time for me to pass what I have inside my JSON. So you can just come down here, and don't forget that whenever you want to use property alongside JSON data, you always need to convert it into an object first. So let's make call on the method JSON dot pass, and inside it I want to pass my variable, which is text variable, and I also want to pass a function, and this function is going to hold few things. So it is going to hold a key as well as a value. So this is going to act like a callback functions that will run in the background. And then I can put a conditional statement to check for birth dates. Births. And I simply want this to return new dates, and the value of that new date that is to be returned. Now, if it can't find a new date that needs to be returned, then this is where we need the else part, and say, okay, if you cannot find it, then give us something else, just return the value. And if we look at what I have here, nothing is showing yet on my screen. So let's move on and let's look for a way to get what we have on the screen. So let me use the document.getElement by ID method. So I'm going to use this to target the ID of the paragraph that I have here, which is demo. And inside this demo, I want to add another HTML property. And then now, don't forget that using this method here has already helped me converted my JSON data, which I have in this variable, into an object. So I can then use object notation in order to extract or work with the properties of my data. So now that I have access to that, then I can use the dot notation method that I have and available when working with objects in JavaScript. So I can make use of it like this, and then I can have the birth date of this person. So now look at what I have on the screen. Well, you can see this is John undefined, and that's because I have birthday as the key. Meanwhile, I am calling birth when I'm trying to call that key. So I need to correct this in order to fix it. So Now that I have birth date, so let me add a space. Now you can see John 2005 and 20. So the information is coming from what we have inside our JSON here. The birth date is 2000, year 2000, May 20 May year 2000, and we have age. So I just extracted the name and the birth date. Now, if I need any other property that I need to extract, it is just for me to, you know, pass what I have and then call the property alongside it. So let's say I want to call the age, I can say, okay, is from object.city, and you see, let me add this space. John 25 2000 is from New York. Now, clearly looking at our example, the script that we have here passes our standard JSON, which is what we have here. So this is basically holding a profile string, and it is in a JSON format. You can see the presence of the single and double quotes. So what we basically have in this example is that our script, which is what we have inside our script section, passes our standard JSON profile string. However, instead of just running a simple pass, like if you just want to convert a simple text, it passes an inline function as a second argument in order to act as a inline helper function. So this function monitor the incoming key. So when it catches the birth or it catches the city key, it converts its data into a real date object instantly, and all other fields pass through completely remains unchanged. So when this function catch something like a birth date, so a values like this, it catches and it passes a function, a value like this, and converts it into a real object date. And how does it do that? Well, you will notice that here under the inside the if statement, we are making use of a new date constructor. That is, whatever value that is passed from the profile string, once it is passed inside this new date constructor, then this new date constructor will convert it into a readable text and a standard date format that you can understand when you see it in JavaScript. And whatever other keys that is passed in, they will remain completely unchanged. Here are a few key takeaways from this lesson. The revival function is ideal for automatic sanitizing, changing, or reviving complex data points across large data sets without writing extra cleanup code later. And number two is that your revival function must always return a value for every key. If you don't return a value for a specific pair, that property will be completely wiped out of the final resulting object. As you can see, your revival function must always return a value for every key. So you can see here we are returning a new date, and if the value cannot be converted, then return that value itself. And that exactly is what you can see here in our inline section of our code and our inline helper. So everything remains completely unchanged when passed in, except for the date that needs to be converted into readable format or into a type of date that one can easily understand. So these are two critical things about this example.